Pardon? What's wicked grief? What happened? There was a big accident on Berry New Road tonight. I'm not sure what it was. Here we go. Excellent. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. Thank you for joining us on TorahAnytime.com. Again, as always, if you want to get in touch, davideisenberg@gmail.com. Tonight, I'd like to discuss a few points in the Parasha, and we'll start right at the beginning. So it's hard for me to show you this because I don't have a Sefer Torah with me over here. Hi, good evening, Sori. Good evening, Lloyd. Oh, we have people saying good evening as well from here, from the Facebook feed. So, in the Torah, normally you'll find that each Parasha is either separated by what's called a Parasha Pesucha or Parasha Stuma. Parasha Pesucha means you move on to the next line. So whatever it is, you stop, you move to the next line, next paragraph. Or Parasha Stuma would mean that you'd have a space, a gap of 9 letters, and then after that gap of 9 letters, you start the next Parasha. And you'll find certain Parashas have one and certain Parashas have the other. The exception to the rule is Parashas Vayechi. In Vayechi, you will not find that there is more than about 1 or 2 letters worth of space. And in general, it's actually quite hard to find Parashas Vayechi when you're looking at it. So the question is, and Rashi already asked it, Lama Parashas Ustuma. Why does Vayechi not have this space before the Parasha? And therefore he answers because when Yaakov Avinu died, the word Stuma means closed. The eyes and the hearts of Klal Yisrael became closed from the tsaras that they had of being enslaved, because that's when they started being enslaved, and that's what Rashi tells us. Rashi says another answer, but that's the answer of Rashi that we're going to be focusing on today. And the question is, what does that mean? That it didn't really happen when Yaakov Avinu died, because we know even after Yaakov Avinu died, they still had time till all the tribes, all the Shvatim died, and only then did they start becoming enslaved. So why is it that Rashi tells us as soon as the Shvatim died already as soon as Yaakov died it was problematic? It wasn't. It was only later. And the other thing is, we ask the question, this Pasha is Setuma, this Pasha seems to only have a small and not a big break. It doesn't have any break, not a small break nor a big break. You'll find that, as we said, it only has 1 or 2 letters. That's not called Stuma either, because the Parasha Stuma we normally refer to has 9 letters. So I saw today, again, I saw it this morning, and I didn't write down who everything was from, so I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to quote exactly who everything was from. But I saw a very interesting idea today. And that's the following, and I think this is an important idea for all of us in our Golus as well. I think if you look back at Germany, I think that would be a great prototype for us to look at. Some people who looked at Germany in the 1930s saw the writing on the wall, right? I'm sure you know people that literally in 1930, they heard Hitler's speeches, they saw all the Hitler Jugend, and they saw the young people, and they saw the SS, and they saw everybody walking through the streets and marching, and Sieg Heil, and whatever else they said. And right away they realized, this is no good. And if this is what's happening and this is what people are saying, it's only a question of time before things start to get violent. And therefore they packed their bags and they left Germany, Austria, wherever they could, when they could, as long as they were still allowed out of the country. And I'm sure some of you must know people that left in the 1930s, that left Germany to come to other countries because they figured, let's get out while things are good. Where others said, no, it's not really going to happen. This is our country. This is Germany. We're so assimilated. We are such a part of society. There is no way that we're not going to remain a part of this society. There's no way they're just going to kick out all the bankers and the lawyers and the doctors and the professionals, etc., etc. Who's going to do that? Yes, you know, the plain, simple fellow on the street might be slightly anti-Semitic. I get it. Okay. Not everybody can be very, very pro-Jewish. But Hitler's not really going to come to power. And even when he came to power, he's not really going to be able to do anything like what he says he's going to do. This all is not going to happen. And for us with hindsight, which is 2020, which please don't make the joke because everybody's made the hindsight 2020 joke already. And I think people are sick of the hindsight 2020 joke by now. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. Clive, you're nodding, yeah? You heard this one about hindsight being 2020.
On the 2021, we will all have 2020 hindsight.
We will, and I must tell you, we won't be seeing a very positive picture either. Okay? So, now on the 1st of January, Klein says, on the 1st of January, we'll all have 2020 hindsight. But we look back at the people in Germany, and sometimes you look back at that and you say, did nobody realize what was happening? Did nobody understand what was going on? And the sad thing is, no, they didn't realize. Why? Okay, you can have different historians and different people have different conclusions about this. They have different theories about why it is that this happened or didn't happen. But the bottom line is that the people who were going through it didn't see it. And you find a very similar thing in our Pasha as well. You'd think that the Jewish people would realize we're in Egypt, things are going to get nasty. And yet, they're oblivious to it. They're living in Egypt. They're feeling quite comfortable. They feel like they're part of the country. They feel like everything, the world's an oyster. All good. Until when? Not until all of the tribes died. Much before that already. Do you know what happened when Yaakov Avinu died? Yaakov Avinu dies, and what happens then? There's embalmment, and there's 30 days worth of Avel, of mourning in Egypt, and only after 70 days, imagine 70 days, imagine the uproar we would have in this community if you had to wait 70 days to bury someone. Bury somebody, we try to bury them within a day, within 2 days. Nobody gets buried 70 days later. That would be a terrible travesty of justice if we bury someone. Here, Yaakov Avinu, our forefather Yaakov, is being buried 70 days later, and you know who's burying him 70 days later? Yosef. And how did Yosef go about burying his father? You know what he had to do? He had to come to Pharaoh, and he had to send a message to Pharaoh, and he had to say, listen, my father made me promise, and it's really not nice, and he'd like me to do this, and I'm asking you please for permission to go and to allow my... Wait. Wasn't Yosef the second in command? Wasn't he the guy that was the big shot, that made all the calls? Absolutely. Save the country, second in command. What's he asking Pharaoh for? Whenever his father died, let's go. And we didn't do that. You know what he did? He had to wait 40 days of embalmment and 30 days of mourning, and then he has to ask Pharaoh, and he has to tell Pharaoh, listen, I swore, I can't help it. I already promised my father that I would do this. And that's what Pharaoh says back to him, go and bury your father in the way you've sworn. Yaakov Avinu was very clever. It seems strange. At the beginning of the Seder, Yaakov Avinu says to his son, please don't bury me in Egypt. He says, no problem, I won't bury you in Egypt. Instead, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take me to Israel. He says, Daddy, no problem, I'll take you to Israel. Son, I'd like you to swear that you're going to take me to Israel. You don't trust Yosef? He's not trustworthy? He was your favorite son? You don't think that if I asked my son to do something? Do you know how many times I've had this where I've had people, it was their last wish to do X, Y, and Z, and their people and their children are very, very, very particular to make sure they do exactly what they've been told. So, sadly, for example, if the last wish of the person who's passed away was to be cremated, it's often very hard to convince the family. In most cases, it's almost impossible to convince the family not to cremate their loved one. Because they always say the same thing. But Rabbi, it was his dying wish. Are you going to deny a dying man his dying wish? Is that what you're telling me that Judaism demands of us? The answer is yes, but not in all instances, in this instance specifically. Yes, you should deny him his dying wish in this specific instance. But it makes it very, very difficult. So here's a dying man with a dying wish. You think Yosef, who was Yaakov Avinu's favorite son and who loved Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov Avinu says, please, I'd like you to bury me in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel. You think Yosef's going to ignore that? Yeah, my father asked me to go. I can't be bothered. I mean, who wants to schlep from Egypt to Israel? What a trip we're going to have to make. And, the food's not good in Israel, and the weather's not good in all the moaning. Of course he would do it. Says, Yaakov, I want you to promise me. Why? Because he knew as soon as he dies, it might not be so straightforward. And so he had to come to his master, the king. Yosef comes as master, the king, and he says, listen, I want to take up my father. Really? We don't really want you taking Jacob out of here. He says, well, I promised him. Okay, promise is a promise. Very clever. He made a promise because he realized this might not work the way I want it to work. And the Jewish people were oblivious to the fact that exile in reality had already started. When you're living in a host country, you are in exile. There's no two ways around it. Yes, some host countries are very friendly to us, and some host countries are very, very adversarial to us. That's true. Not every host country is a great place to be. Some places are terrible places to be. We lived in some countries for hundreds of years very, very peacefully. And then suddenly everything turned around. But knowing that you're in a host country means I know and I understand I am not home, and there's no place like home. And at any point in time, the tide could change, and I could become an unwelcome guest from having been a welcome guest for so many years. And that is what we're saying over here. We didn't even leave space between Vayechi and the Parasha before, is because it like crept up on them. It was something, sometimes you turn around and suddenly something's here. You ever had that? You're waiting for a certain date. I'm waiting to turn 40. I'm waiting to turn 50. I'm waiting for 25th anniversary, whatever it is. And you're like, it's going to be in 10 years. It's going to be in 5 years. Whoa, it's suddenly here. I always think Rosh Hashanah creeps up on us. You just think to yourself, it was just Rosh Hashanah now. Gosh, it's Rosh Hashanah again tomorrow. That's what it feels like. Things creep up on you. This crept up on the Jews because the Jews didn't realize and didn't make peace with the fact that in an alien country, they will always be aliens. They will always be guests. They will not belong there. And that happened right after Yaakov Avinu died, not right after all the Shvatim died. And that is an important thing. I think we always need to realize we're never safe. So people say, well, that's a very negative way of looking at things, but that's the way it is. Over the years, we've seen again and again, even the places that we thought were safe as can be, sometimes turned out to be the worst places. Germany was as safe as it got, and it turned out to be a terrible place. Austria was very good to the Jews. Hungary, the Jewish people, do you know how assimilated the Hungarian Jews were? Do you know what positions of power they had within the Hungarian government? And all that overnight changed. It just flips. And realizing and recognizing that you are in another country and you are never 100% safe and certain is the first part of this. Okay, that's the first idea. Now, let's move on to the next idea. Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim. We're on page 268 in the Art Scroll Chumashim. Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Vayehi Yemei Yaakov, and it became the days of Yaakov Shnei Chai, of the years of his life, Shema Shonim, 7 years, Va'aboim Umashana, and 140 years. It's 147 years. Yaakov Avinu moved to Egypt when he's 130, lived there for 17 years, and now he's about to die at the age of 147. So Rav Schwab asked the question, and it says, Vayehi Yemei Yaakov Shnei Chayov. Vayehi means it became. What do you mean it became? Vayiyu, and they were. They didn't become. It seems like suddenly something happened that flipped this around, that changes around from what it used to be. It was something else, and now it's become this. So what was it, and what did it become? So here we see a very beautiful idea that Rav Schwab says. If you look back to what happens in Parshas Vayigash, you remember the end of Shishi. Yehuda is sent to Goshen. Yosef meets up with Yaakov. He says to his children, he says to all his brothers and his family, if Pharaoh calls you in, you know what you need to say? You need to say, we are shepherds. We've always been shepherds. We don't know anything else. All we want to do is pasture our sheep. And Pharaoh will say, ooh, we don't like shepherds. Get out of here. Spend your time in Eretz Goshen. We don't want anything to do with you. And that's exactly what they do. And then we have on page 262. It starts on 262 and then moves to 264. Vayove Yosef es Yaakov Aviv. Yosef brings his father Jacob Vayamidel Ifnei Pharaoh and makes him stand before Pharaoh. Vayavach Yaakov es Pharaoh, and Yaakov blesses Pharaoh. Vayoma Pharaoh Yaakov, and Pharaoh says to Yaakov, my goodness, Kama Yemei Shnei Chayecha. How many days are the days of your life? And look over here. Vayoma Yaakov el Pharaoh. Yaakov says to Pharaoh, Yemei Shnei Megurai. the days of my sojourning, 130 years. Me'at veroim, few and bad, hayu yemei shnei chayai, were the years of my life. V'lo hisigu, and they didn't reach as yemei shnei chayai, the days of the life of my fathers, b'nei megurihem, in the places that they lived in. So have a look over here. You find Yaakov Avinu has asked the following question: Kama yemei shnei chayecha? How many days are the days of your life? That's the question. Chayecha, of your life. And Yaakov answers, Yemei Shnei Megurai. How come he moves away from Yemei Chayai? He says, Yemei Shnei Megurai, the days of my sojourning. Well, I didn't ask you the days of your journeys. I asked you the days of your life. And you've changed the word around from saying the days of your life to the days of your sojourning. Why have we changed that? And then you say, Me'at veroim, few and bad and terrible were the days Shnei Chayai. Now we get back to Shnei Chayai, the days of my life. So what happened over here? We have Chayecha, Megurai, and Shnei Chayai. We go back and forth and back again to the same thing. So what's the difference? So I'll explain to you what Rav Schwab says, a beautiful idea. Some people are alive and some people are living. Yeah, let me say that again. Some people are merely alive and some people are actually living. And the difference is a huge difference. Some people, they happen to be alive, but their life is not much of a life. You know, you take certain individuals. I've seen sometimes you have people that have been in hospital, that have been in a coma for many, many years. Are they alive? Yes, they are alive. Would you say they're living a life? They're not living much of a life. Does that mean we can pull the plug on them? Absolutely not. They're still alive, but they're not living a life. And so Yaakov is asked by Pharaoh, Kamo yemei shnei chayecha? How many days have you been alive for? And Yaakov says, alive? Or how many days have I lived? Very different questions. You want to know how many years have passed since the day I was born? Yemei shnei megurai, the days that I have been alive? 130 years. So they say, oh, 130 years, that's a lot of years. So you've been alive for a long time. He says, no, I've not been alive for a long time. Or maybe I've been alive for a long time, but not been living for a long time. Me'at veroim, but horrible and few. Hoyu yemei shnei chaya. You want to look at the days of my life? How many days was I able to live comfortably? How many days was I able to live the way I wanted to live as a free Jew, being able to do the Torah and the mitzvahs, not hounded by my horrible brother or by my terrible stepfather or by the fact that my children are quarreling or the fact that my son has been taken away from me? How many days did I have? Very, very few. Me'at veroim. Very few and terrible. Hayu yemei shnei chayai. The days of my life of living have been very few and not been very good. Alive, a long time. Living, not a lot. That's the conversation that Yaakov has with Pharaoh in Parasha Vayechi. When he moves to Egypt, and then when he moves to Egypt, this is his retirement dream. Now I must tell you, some people when they retire, they live their dream. Some people when they retire, they go absolutely bonkers and meshuggah. Some people want to retire because they have so much to do. I got places to go. I have time to spend with my family. I have charity work that I wanted to do. I have things that I wanted to learn. And they sit down as soon as they retire and they create a whole new life for themselves. And they start blossoming and blooming in a life in retirement that they've never lived when they weren't retired. And some people have actually nothing to do. So they retire and then they sit around watching television for 3 months only to realize it's not fun to watch TV all day long. I really don't have enough of a relationship with my wife to want to spend enough time with her. I don't enjoy sports or golf or hobbies. And I'm stuck. You know people like that? Are they just stuck?
Yeah, he just carries on working.
He carried on working.
His son's taken over the business.
Yes.
And he just can't stop.
But that's because there's no point for him to stop. If he stops, he'll lose his whole raison d'etre. He got nothing to do if he stops. Some people are so excited. I know people that want to take early retirement at 50. They can't wait. If they make enough money at 50, they'll retire and they'll live out their life doing whatever they want to do or whatever they've dreamed of. And they've worked hard for 25, 30 years to make enough money to be able to do it. And there are people that can afford to do that. They can afford to retire at 50. And they do. They sell out. They make it big. They buy themselves an endowment policy, or they invest in something that gives them a passive income, and off they go. And have a brilliant time. They love their life. Some people at 80, they retire and have a horrible life. And Yaakov Avinu now comes to the end of his life. And this is the prime of his life. This is where Yaakov Avinu is living. Vayechi Yaakov be'etz Yitzrayim. Suddenly Yaakov has a life. He lives it up. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. He's loving it. He's taking it all in. And so Yaakov lived in Egypt for 17 years. And look at what happens now. Vayehi yemei Yaakov shenei chayov. You know what now happens? The days of his life and the years that he has lived suddenly become 147. We've now merged the two ideas. Suddenly Yaakov Avinu is not anymore feeling so lost and forlorn. Yaakov Avinu is not anymore feeling that my life was so terrible. In those 17 years where he gets to see his children and his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to have nachas from them and see them learning Torah and sitting around with them, etc., etc. In those years, that's when he suddenly looks back at everything that's gone on and he says, you know what? It was all worth it. Look at the family that I have. Look at what I've built. Look at what I have. You know, sometimes when people are in the middle of something, especially, you take people that have a big family. Somebody's got 10, 12 kids. Sometimes look at them and you think to yourself, how in the world are they making it through that? I can't imagine the amount of headspace it takes to have that many children, the amount of money it takes to raise those children, and you raise them and you marry off one, you marry off another one, you have a problem with this one, you have a problem with that, and finally you've married off all your children. I have an uncle my wife actually has an uncle, who's got 13 children. He's my mother-in-law's brother. And they finally married off all their kids. And I said, it's unbelievable. When you got to that stage, your home is empty and you look out at what you've created and you say, my goodness gracious, maybe I worked like an animal for the last 40, 45 years to create this. But you look back at it and you see it and suddenly you go, wow, my magnum opus. This is fantastic. It's phenomenal. I'm so happy I put in the effort. Suddenly you see it, and Yaakov looks back at everything and says, with all that has happened, I see it all fall into place now. And now, suddenly I can see my entire life through a very different lens. Vayehi yemei Yaakov shnei chayov. The days of Yaakov that he was alive and the days that he lived have now merged together and it becomes 147. And I look back and I say, it's all good. And that's the great thing of Yaakov Avinu. At the end of his life, he has that closure. And that's what we see over here. Okay, now we move on to another idea. The Emes Yaakov follows on from an idea that we spoke about in Parshas Vayishlach. The Emes Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, writes about the bracha that's given to Shimon and Levi. Some say it's not a bracha. Rashi says this might not be a bracha. It's just he's telling them off. Shimon and Levi achim. Shimon and Levi are comrades, are brothers. Klei chomas mechoreseim. Their weaponry is a stolen craft. That's not a Jewish thing to be fighting like that. To kill out this entire city of Shechem. That's not a Jewish way of doing things. And therefore, he says, "Besoidam al torei nafshi." In the conspiracy, my soul shouldn't enter. Beikolam matecha kavodia. When the congregation, I shouldn't join. Kiba apam hagu ish. For in their rage, they murdered people. Uve'etzoyim mekushar. And with their whim, they maimed an ox, meaning Yosef. Aror apam kioz, their anger should be cursed because it is strong. Ve'avrosam kikoshoso, and their wrath because it is harsh. Achal came be Yaakov afitzim Yisrael. I will separate them amongst Yaakov, and I will disperse them amongst the Jewish people. And if you remember, we said at the time that they became melamne tinoikos. Levi and Shimon became those that taught the Jewish people. They became teachers. And we spoke at the time and we said, why in the world would we take these people that seem so violent and turn them into teachers? Why are you who wants violent teachers? And so the answer that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky gave at the time is, when you look at Shimon and Levi, one of the things they say is, are we going to allow our sister to be treated like that? Like a harlot? Are we going to allow it to be just used and then spit out like a piece of chewing gum? No such thing. And Yaakov Avinu realized that their rage was real, and it came from a place of extreme caring. It didn't come from a place of extreme anger. And therefore Yaakov says, who am I going to turn into the teachers of the Jewish people? Who are the best people to take forward my message to my children? Shimon and Levi. Those who care the most. I remember I gave this speech after I spoke here. I gave this speech in the seminary where I teach. And I told the girls, I said, write down, take 5 minutes, 3 minutes, to write down those traits that make the teachers, your best teachers that you've had, stand out. And all of the traits, they give different traits, caring, goes above and beyond, etc., a lot of different traits that they wrote. And I said to them afterwards, I said, if you were to go ahead and you were to look at all that comes from a teacher who sincerely wants to make a difference and who sincerely cares. If you have a teacher that couldn't care less, they're not going to put in the extra time, and they're not going to notice you, and they're not going to compliment you. They're just here to get their paycheck and to teach what they've been taught to teach, what they've been told to teach. I've been told to teach Chumash, I'll teach Chumash. I've been told to teach science, I'll teach science. They don't teach students. They teach subjects. And he says, I see Shimon and Levi have that love for the Jewish people. They are the people that I want to teach my Torah. That's what he says. Says Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, however, it wasn't as successful as was planned originally. If you look throughout history, you will find the teachers of the Jewish people become who? Who's the teacher of the Jewish people? Levi. Not Shimon. If you look at the end of the Torah, when Moshe Rabbeinu gives the bracha to the Bnei Levi, he says, Yoru mishpatecha leYaakov. They will they will give rulings on your justice, on your, let's see. They shall teach your ordinances to Yaakov and your Torah to Israel. That's how it's translated over here in the Art Scroll Chumash, page 1115. Okay, put verse 10 over there. Yom Shadav said, they will teach your Torah to Klal Yisrael. He doesn't say that about Shimon. He only says about Levi. Do you know why? Because what ended up happening is this blessing was brought to fruition with the children of Levi, but not the children of Shimon. And they both use their kanos. They use their zealotry, one in a positive way and one in a negative way. So let's look at the positive first. Levi. Mila Shem Elai. They made the golden calf, and Moshe Rabbeinu calls out, Mila Shem Elai. Who is here? Who's standing up for God? Levi. You know who came to him? All the children of Levi. And Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, you need to kill those idol worshippers. And the Bnei Levi said, no problem, we will kill anyone. And where else do you have them? Who did not send a spy to the land of Israel? The tribe of Levi. They weren't interested. You see again and again the tribe of Levi were the ones that fought for God's people and fought for God's Torah. They were the ones that used the Torah to direct them and to guide them in their zealotry, and that is how they behaved and that is how they acted. Shimon also has a story of kanos. Shimon's tribe also have a story where they take on zealotry, but it's a very different story and it sounds very different. By the way, there is also a story of zealotry amongst the tribe of Levi gone wrong. That's the story of Korach. But you look at the story of Zimri. If you remember the story about the beginning of Parasha Pinchas, right before Parasha Pinchas, the Jewish people at the end of Parshas Balak, we read they're sitting in this place called Shittim, and in that place, suddenly they started being called on by the Midianite women. And the Midianite women call to them, and they give them to eat from their non-Jewish, from their idols, from all their things. And also the Midianite women started having affairs with them. And Vihine Ishba, there's one man that comes forth. He brings forward to his brothers Midianis in front of everybody, and he has relations with her in front of everyone in public. He comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says, Moshe Rabbeinu, am I allowed to marry this Midianite woman? Am I not allowed to marry the Midianite woman? To which Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm really sorry, the answer is no. And his answer back is, and who permitted you to marry your wife? Huh? Zipporah was not a Midianite woman, she was a Midianite woman. So you're telling me that I cannot do something and it's perfectly fine for you. That's the guy who gives the Torah. That's the kind of laws that we have. This kind of skewed favoritism. He's very, very nasty about it. And then he goes and he shows everybody what he thinks of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he creates this public Chilul Hashem by having these relations with this woman of Zimri, the daughter of Cosby, the daughter of Asur. Cosby, the daughter of Tzur. And Zimri and Cosby have relations, and you know who has to come forward. Who steps forward to save the day? Who is the zealot that steps forward? It's Pinchas. And Pinchas comes from which tribe? The tribe of Levi. He was a Kohen. Or he wasn't a Kohen yet, but he was the son of Aaron HaKohen from the tribe of Levi. He steps forward. And what you see over here, and this is such an important lesson, zealotry is rarely a good thing and can only be a good thing when it is guided 100% by the Torah. If you have zealotry that is guided by anything else other than the Torah, then you end up with a Zimri who steps forward and takes a zealous position against Moshe Rabbeinu, against the leader of the Jewish people, against the greatest rabbi that ever lived. He stands forward and he says, you are just one big hypocrite. That's Zimri. That's what the Bnei Shimon get up to with their zealotry. Very, very different to the zealotry that the Bnei Levi get up to. And it's important to know that. Zealotry is not for everyone, and in general, it's probably for no one. Being a zealot doesn't work out well for 99.9% of the population. I've rarely seen somebody who's very zealous about something that has made a positive impact. Very rarely do you have a positive impact. I know a lot of people have said this before me, and although I know that this is not 100% true because I've been told that it has happened, but most people will tell you nobody's become Shomer Shabbos by having a stone thrown at them while they were driving on Shabbos. Yeah? Pardon? Yeah. But no, I mean, you wonder, if you were driving on Shabbos and the stone came hurled at you, you wouldn't go, gee, they must be really angry. I must figure out what this Torah is all about. But turn the car off, park up, and go, do you know what? Can I come to Shalashudas and find out more about this stone throwing cult? This sounds great. Nobody does that. Because in general, zealotry does not speak to people. It doesn't really get people riled up. What we really need is love. And if you want, that's really how you change most people. And if you want to engage in zealotry, if it's not 100% backed up by Torah law, in general, what you'll end up with is some kind of skewed, perverted kind of zealotry, nothing that the Torah really condones. Lastly, the Rabbi Yerucham says an interesting idea over here. Shimon v'Levi achim, Shimon and Levi are brothers. Klei chomas mechoreseim, stolen craft, weaponry. Their weaponry is a stolen craft that doesn't really belong to them. They shouldn't have really been engaging in that. Says Rabbi Yerucham, an unbelievable thing. You know what Shimon and Levi are being accused of over here? They're being accused of being fakers. They're being told, you are not genuine. because what you're doing doesn't belong to you. Very strange. That's what we're telling them. It doesn't belong to you, and therefore, so I copied someone else. The answer is, says Rabbi Yerucham, exactly the problem. Why are we copying other people? We, as individuals, basically, we learn by mimicking other people. That's how, how did we learn how to talk? We heard our parents talking, we heard everyone around us talking, and we mimicked them. Which is why, for example, I cannot do a Scottish accent for the life of me. But had I grown up in Scotland, then I would have a very good Scottish accent and probably a horrible American accent. Why? That's just the way it is. Nobody grew up in Scotland going, I can't get this accent straight. I always sound like somebody who's got the Queen's English. Everybody talks like the people that surround them. And in England, in Manchester, they'll sound like Mancunians. And in London, they sound like Londoners. And even live in Essex, you sound Cockney, whatever it is. Because we copy other people. How do we learn how to walk? We watch our parents do it, and we try to, we learn that. We watch people moving around. We smile when people smile at us. What do you do with a child? How do you get a baby to smile? You walk a baby, go, one of those faces. People make those ridiculous faces, and the baby is looking at you smiling, and what do? They reciprocate. They copy back. Very rarely do babies just look around and smile, because I don't know if they have a sense of humor like that. But if you smile at them, they'll copy you and they'll smile back. And in general, we're very good at copying and mimicking others. But the truth is, in order to be a real, true individual, you need to be genuine. Can't just copy people. Can't say he does this and he does that and she does this and she does that, and I'm going to do like they do. Then that's just a stolen craft. And that's not you. And that's what Yaakov is now charging Shimon and Levi with. This isn't you. And if it's not you, you shouldn't be behaving like that. You should find within you the genuine you and start behaving genuinely like you are. Not like other people want to see you, not like you want other people to see you. Who are you really inside? Who do you want to be? Not who are you trying to impress everybody else that I should look like this is who I am. And when you can change around from who do I want to look like to who am I really, that's when you become a genuine person. And the Torah is telling us over here, we want genuine people. We don't want fakers, we don't want phonies, we don't want people that make believe for someone else, because that's not real. And that's what Shimon and Levi are being blamed with over here. Klei chomas mechar is saying, it's not real, it's not yours. Don't behave like something that's not really you. Okay? I'd like to thank you again, all of you who have joined me on Facebook Live. Thank you to everybody who joined us on Torah Anytime. If you want to get in touch, again, it's david@eisberg@gmail.com. And thank you to all of you who joined us on Zoom. As always, the greatest crowd are the guys on Zoom. And thank you to Ivor, who's here in person, to make sure that I actually feel like I'm talking to someone and not to a whole bunch of machines.
Thank you, Rabbi Shkov.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Elliot and Maureen, Michael, Malcolm. Who else we have? Clive and Michael and Iris. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Keep safe, keep well.
Keep safe. Take care. Be well. Let's go back over here. Just enough battery. Just enough battery. Oh, I forgot to end the live video.